Welcome everybody to another cubesys panel discussion. So today is around, we're still on our Azure Arc sort of series. So today is a smarter IT for non-for-profit organizations. And we're going to talk around cutting costs and simplifying management with Azure Arc for those NFP type businesses. Before we get started, before we get into, just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, online and offline, on which we meet today, and pay our respects to our elders past and present. So let's just do some quick introductions. As I mentioned, this topic today is smarter IT for NFPs, cutting costs and simplifying management with Azure Arc. So first of all, I'll open that discussion. So my name is Shabaz, I'm a senior cloud consultant for cubesys. We also have from cubesys Kanthan. Kanthan, do you have a quick introduction to yourself?
Hi, Kanthan here. I work in the sales team and look after our key account customers, as well as talking about cloud and modern work with all our new customers. I joined cubesys probably about 6 months ago from Microsoft. Worked in the Singapore ASEAN team, looking after the modern work and Azure platforms.
Nice. And that's a good segue to our third person on the panel today. Phil, do you want to give yourself introduction?
Thanks, Shabaz. Yeah, Phil Barlow. I'm the, as the slide says, Director of Specialist Sales for Asia in our Tech for Social Impact business. So that's working with our non-profit organisations across the region, predominantly focused on the ANZ cohort of customers right now. We are always looking for opportunities to expand further and do more though. I've been with Microsoft for a number of years. Gosh, it's about 9 years now, actually, Shabaz, and I've been working specifically in the non-profit sector. Pretty recent change for me. I've actually spent the last 5 years being the CTO for our partner business across Australia and New Zealand. So I'm well accustomed to our friends at cubesys.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. And we're obviously very grateful to have Phil on this panel with us. So just a discussion format. Obviously, we are recording the session. Please do feel free, the people who've joined to watch, please use the chat to ask any questions. We obviously have our experts on hand as well to ask those questions. And the video and content will be made available after, and you'll be sent a link to that as well. So obviously this is our third panel discussion, and what I wanted to just quickly do is just go over how we've got to this point of talking about NFPs. So I'll just quickly give an overview for those people who weren't on there. So it's important to understand how we've arrived at this discussion and how Azure Arc can help those not-for-profit companies to cut costs and simplify management. In the first panel discussion, if you remember, we had Paul Lemaitre from Microsoft, and he introduced this concept of adaptive cloud. And what Paul said was an adaptive cloud approach shifts organizations from sort of a reactive posture to one of proactive evolution. And it enables people to anticipate and act upon changes in those market trends, customer needs, and sort of technological enhancements ahead of time. And this strategic foresight then enables businesses to pivot quickly, embrace continuous improvement, and integrate sort of new technologies seamlessly. And by building that resilience into the operational model, businesses can optimize resources, get that usage and mitigate security business risks before they manifest. Then on our second panel discussion, we were lucky enough to be joined by, again, from Microsoft, Dean Corcoran. And again, he has bags of experience. He had bags of experience with customers, specifically in the NFP space, with sort of adaptive cloud. What Dean did, he questioned the organizations. Do we actually know what they have or where it is from what of a data perspective? Do we know what it does, and do we know how they can optimize it? You went to discuss this sort of 4-step cycle around inventorying your resources, show intent by getting new services up and running more efficiently. Then like step 3, let cost efficiency play its part. And then step 4, doing the art of the possible. What now you're in there, what is the art of the possible? How can you utilize and leverage those as your services? And that really does bring us to where we are today, which is NF and not for profit and how adaptive cloud can benefit them. So I suppose the first thing I really want to do is talk about the challenges around that. So Phil, obviously I know you mentioned you've recently kind of come into the NFP space. here are some of the challenges that I could kind of think of around NFP. What's your experience in the time you've been in your role around those sort of not-for-profit companies and their challenges with this space?
I'd say the key one that comes out to me, Shabaz, really is ensuring that we are providing the right technology and the right platforms and the right commercial agreements and everything that goes together with that to ensure that the people that are delivering the frontline services to the mission that the not-for-profit is actually trying to address gets greater than its fair share of resourcing. That's really what we want to make. We want to make sure that whatever is spent internally, whatever capital and human resources are focused on delivering capabilities to the organisations. The first thing we have to keep in mind is that it's about real people at the end of the, whether it's at the end of a telephone, whether it's on the end of in a aged care environment, whether it's care in home, some form of service offering really comes to the fore. So I look at this world of there's a lot of discussions around fundraising, grant management, kind of those are sort of the typical what I would call business opportunities in the not-for-profit space. How is that managed as seamlessly and simply as possible? And then there's the external side of things, looking at the services that are actually delivered that are moving closer and closer towards any of the missions that we're engaged with.
Excellent. Kanthan, I just want to bring you in, and obviously with NFP, they are an organisation, they are a business. But can you just talk a little bit about maybe the intensity of those challenges, and how they differ from maybe a non-for-profit?
Yeah, look, I guess the challenge for non-profits, I mean, like any organisation, but is budgets and how to make what your limited budgets stretch further. So when you look at those type of opportunities within that NFP space, it comes with a whole bunch of extra challenges, right? So not only are you trying to work out how am I going to spend this much money annually, you've got to keep accountable to where those funds came from. So a lot of organizations are funded via grants and government funding, but also donations, right? So really at the end of the day, you when those annual reports are done, you need to be accountable to how that money's been spent and whether you're going to get money the following year. So it's a little bit different to a commercial organization, which might have revenue coming in from sales and services. As a non-profit, you've got to keep justifying why you're maintaining that non-profit status, as well as where that money is being spent. So that kind of puts a lot more pressure on teams to really be getting on top of those costs for environments.
I think, Kanthan, there's another piece on top of that as well, or in association with that as well, that we talk about in the commercial space that is not really applicable in non-profits, and that's that ability to change and pivot. In a commercial space, if you see something that is challenging, and it is quite straightforward to be able to pivot, be able to change direction, do something different, whether that's bringing new revenue streams to market and whether it's a new partnership and delivering new products out to the market. But there is that ability to make change, whereas a lot of non-profits, they're mission based. Right. And so we are really that you can't just suddenly pivot that mission. That is an immovable object, and that's the guiding light and the direction that we're going and the path we're on. So we can't just have that flexibility to pivot and do something different if it's not really in our world.
No, that's just a really good point. Actually, it's not as easy. Like you said, there's a lot more pressure involved, and that mission statement, you can't just change that overnight.
No.
Well, not even long term. It is what it is, and you have to kind of work around that. What I'd like to just kind of do is just go a bit more granular now with some of those challenges. Obviously, we've spoken a bit of a higher level of those. We've mentioned things like limited IT budgets, the complexity of managing multiple environments. I think later on in this panel discussion, we've actually got a use case which touches on that. Securing compliance risks as well. That sort of data governance and that visibility into where the data is and how best to use it. And then that multi-vendor management capability as well, being able to do that, like you said, without kind of expanding on cost too much and that sort of multiple tooling. The lack of standardization as well, I think, can be a bit of an issue because, again, if you do have that multi-vendor management platform, having a single standard for your entire estate rather than different standards across different cloud vendors can be a problem as well. That's a challenge. And then we go into sort of, making sure they can recover and back up their sort of multi-cloud environment. just want to bring you again in Kanthan to talk about some of these complexities and challenges. Where do you see that, especially like if we talk about multi-vendor management and within that NFP space? How have you seen these sort of NFPs handle that sort of area?
Look, it's once again, it comes back to it's no different to any other organization, right? It's just what's driving the reasoning behind having those environments. So anything from you're starting to see in the environments now where a lot of nonprofits are now merging with each other to reduce some of those costs or align some of their goals. And so they kind of inherit different setups. So one being in the cloud, one being with multiple or a different vendor, someone being in SaaS, someone being in on-premise, right? So it could be any number of reasons why they might have gone down that path. Some of the other areas I've seen this happen is when a new solution is rolled out, they always look at it with the view of, okay, what's the best for this company organization now? And that might be moving to cloud. So then suddenly you've got on-premise on one side and you've got cloud or even a different vendor coming in and providing a solution in a different cloud platform. So, it's always done with a bit of silos decision making, so that can be a bit challenging. And so you end up with environments where you've got to consider how do we manage it and how do I reduce these costs across different types of platforms.
Phil, you said something interesting. Sorry, I just clicked in my brain now around that. What you need to remember is there's real people at the end of this. So all these challenges, they are obviously difficult and a lot of pressure with them. But fixing these challenges can benefit real people. Can you just speak on that a little bit more, especially when it comes to NFPs and the such good work that they do in within society?
Yeah. I think there's an easy way to bring this to light, actually, or bring this to life, I should say, Shabaz. That is, I sort of pivot everything, or as much of this as I would put security first. Okay, and I'd always come and talk about security first, and it's in particular since March 2020, when we went into lockdown from COVID pandemic. So the general rule at the moment is over 10% of nonprofits in Australia, I'm sure it's over 10% of nonprofits in Australia have suffered cyber crimes. And that's not just a one-off, that's a repeated cyber crime. Obviously, it's like if you're a sports coach, you train your team. If you find a weakness in your competition, you don't just sort of try it once. You keep going to that same corner of the pitch. That you start looking to penetrate those same spaces. So that's what the cyber criminals do. They'll keep going back. And so when you think of that as that advent, so that's one piece. Then I look at another statistic. Only 1 in 3 nonprofit organizations have implemented multi-factor authentication, right? From some reasonably recent surveys that have gone out. And so you look at these you combine these, and you think there's only one victim here, really, and that is the victim of the end service that has been delivered by this organization. But not only that, it's the money that is spent combating those incidents as well. It's the money that is spent, the time and energy of people and resourcing that needs to be directed into that particular direction. So if I put security first and right at the top of the pedestal, we can solve that security challenge there's no reason in my mind why we can't solve certainly the security challenges for all nonprofits in Australia and New Zealand. Okay, and so if we do that, then I look at what is the pull-through effect that has in terms of the efficiency of service, and it touches on many of the other points that you got on the screen here. Because what you're doing is you're freeing up resources, you're freeing up capital for further investments, you're freeing up people, and ultimately you are preventing the pain of the frontline workers that are actually going to be experiencing this on a day by day. Can you imagine, right? You're working in an aged care home, I don't know, and you're scheduling, or you're delivering pharmaceuticals, into people, and you've got all of this on an iPad, for example, and all of a sudden you can't log into it, and your systems are down. What do? You can't just stop, giving people out their pharmaceuticals, etc. So huge impact. Start with security, number one for me.
That's such an interesting point, because we're talking about cost, as in how much it costs to implement this sort of stuff, but forget the monetary cost. What's the cost of this stuff going wrong? These challenges becoming too much, these NFPs. and it's not about money here. It's about, like you said, people's lives. With some not-for-profits, it could be, like you said, medical. That's people living or dying. That's life or death, isn't it? So there's a much bigger cost than just financial, which is, it's a really interesting point. And that security sits on top of that.
But do you see those challenges as coming from a historical view of, hey, we've got to keep costs low. We've got to keep costs with admin. We've got, IT kind of just falls into a cost center of reducing costs. So how do you think that organizations should, it seems to be more of a business problem as well, right? Shifting to that mindset of, you know what, we need to treat security as a must, not an optional aspect. Does anyone here have any experience around having those conversations with?
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly there's a significant legacy world, I'd call it, in play here, Kanthan, and certainly some of the use cases that you guys have got and you have seen, that legacy world plays a significant component in this particular, this adaptive cloud discussions that you've been having over the past few weeks. It is an element of. It's been an element of the past of the investment to innovate, right? And now what we've actually done, I would say, probably over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, really, is that, and certainly the terminology that Microsoft use around that is democratizing access to many of these services and capabilities that have only really been in the hands of a few number of larger organizations over the years. Now, our aim is to really democratize as much of that as possible and put all of the same tools, capabilities, technology innovation in the hands of everybody, so that we can now have anybody on, any person, any human on the planet being an innovator, and without incurring those additional costs. So there's absolutely legacy in there, Kanthan, and I think that of where we are now in the world of technology, we have significant strides into that ability to say we really can democratize all of this for as many people as possible on the planet.
Good point.
Kanthan, I think that was a really good point, actually, what the question that you posed there, Kanthan. So my background's technical, right? I'm a techie at heart. What I think is important is to when you as an organization, especially when you're an IT team trying to get across risks, you show the risk of what doing nothing will have. So what will happen? What is the outcome of us not doing this, not focusing on security, not investing in these areas? And we just mentioned some outcomes, didn't we, earlier, where it's people's lives potentially. The risk of not having all these things, having not having that budget for all these sort of integration to services, having crowd sprawl, lack of skills. The consequences are huge. I think about that's why it's important to let your organization and document that and show them, if we don't do this, this is what's going to happen. This could potentially happen, and the cost can be huge, like we said, life or death in a lot of those matters.
Great.
Yeah, we've said specifically when we talk about managing multiple sort of environments. We're talking about multiple different cloud environments as well as on premises, and the kind of complexity that brings. We talk about lack of centralized management. Your data is all fragmented. It can cause massive issues. Kanthan, just want to bring you in. What's your experience in this area with managing those multiple environments?
Look, I think the biggest challenge is visibility, right? Knowing, instead of jumping from environment to environment, trying to keep, you look at AWS, Azure, on-prem, each of those platforms or environments are, you're looking at different type of metrics, you're looking at different type of issues and challenges, life cycles, costs. All of those things are kind of different priorities for each of those pieces. So how do you bring them onto the single pane of glass around, where am I spending the money? Where are the costs and inefficiencies lying at the moment? What am I doing with security in that front? And just getting it single, when you're communicating this to the business, you don't want to be spending hours and hours or days trying to put this information together on a monthly basis. And so trying to get that information so you can not only be able to communicate that to the business, but also being able to respond very quickly and being able to address those concerns with your limited team or your existing team set. So, just trying to get a hold of that and understand where your spend is, where do you need to focus your priorities, just things like that. Just getting that visibility is probably the main one I want to call out.
What about
That's a good
skills?
point.
I pick up on this slide here, right? The one that really leaps out at me is the skills. Could you imagine that you have a small but well-formed operational team, running some really significant systems and environments. You may be working with a number of partners like cubesys as well, and working with partners to deliver some level of operational management and capabilities as well. But what you really want, if I am an executive or I'm a board member, I want the very best people that I possibly can within my organization. And therefore, am I really going to have an expectation that I am going to have the very best, the best expertise across all of these different platforms without having some mechanism of arbitrarily sort of raising the profile and looking at a macro vision and a macro operational management environment across all of these? Now, I mean, I've been doing this for too long, 30 years, right? And working with many sort of large organizations. And we've always talked about this ubiquitous and the utopian of the single pane of glass. In environments like this, I think that doesn't do it service. What you're saying there, Kanthan, is because people don't realize is, yes, you want to have that single visibility, but actually you want to have that visibility because you want the decision-making capabilities. You want to actually be able to see, am I making the sensible, the most appropriate types of decisions that I possibly can for my organization? And all of that really, we could talk till the cows go home around the tooling and capabilities that are in there. But really, when things aren't perfect, what really happens is it comes down to people and the skills that those people have to just make things work. We've all been into many organizations where we've seen that, it's like, crikey, if that small team over there was not here, this organization would be on its knees. We've all seen that. We've all been in places thinking, thank goodness for that team, for these people, for bringing everything together. We need to, we need to ensure that we are providing the right capabilities that for the people and the skills that they've got in our organizations.
And I think that is linked to integration of services, because it's not just, we've talked a lot about the IT team, and but when you talk about managing costs, who's going to be doing that? Your finance team, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to actually looking at and making decisions, it's going to be your management team. They need to have all these services integrated to allow them to see all this information. Your finance need to be able to have a tool that can integrate with your multi-cloud, your on-premises, that can see everything, so they can make financial decisions and see who's spending what money. Again, with your management team, they need to be able to make decisions based on who's spending what and what services are coming up, what's coming up on their roadmap as an organization. So the lack of skills at integration of services kind of are very, very closely linked.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So, okay, we've spoken a lot about challenges, spoken a lot about problems. How do we fix it? There's no point in having a problem if you can't fix it, in my opinion. So I think that's where Azure Arc really does bridge the gap, and the concept of adaptive cloud. Our what we feel is a solution. What I feel the solution is Azure Arc, right? And that bridges the gap with a lot of the problems that we've spoken about, especially for NFPs. That centralized management, that enhanced data governance, consistency, giving them a view of where their data is. Security across all your IT assets. Phil, you mentioned security and how important it is. What's your sort of thought process around Azure Arc bridging that gap for all these sort of issues that we've spoken about?
I think of it in three aspects. I think one is there's a technical component to it. Secondly, there's an operational component. And thirdly, surprisingly for some, don't realize, there's a commercial element to it as well. So what do I mean by that? The technical piece is, it covers many of these. Kind of is a bit of a hybrid between, is this technical, is this operations, but that centralized management, the building, the security, and the security, visibility across the entire estate. Those fits into the technical piece for me. Security definitely, visibility definitely. What do I mean by security? just collating the data. You mentioned data earlier, Shabaz, and actually collating that data into a single place. And now with that ability to have our things like our security copilot, our copilot tools running across vast swathes of data that are all being now centrally located, single place, full visibility. I can look for, I can get assessments on my security posture. I can see all of my assets. I can see where the potential holes are and where I'm going to get breached. And I can utilize all of the most modern technology across those as well. Then there's the operations. So this is really in the heart of that tooling piece where I'm doing, I don't know, updates, management, again, visibility. Again, how can I look at some level of compliance around this as well? How do I know simply? How do I know what I've got, where it is, who's in charge, who owns it, who's utilizing it? So there's many aspects there. And then finally, the commercial piece. Imagine if at the moment where the software licensing that is running on many of these assets that are outside of Azure, they're on in a private cloud, private data center, they're in a third-party hosting environment, they're in another a hyperscale cloud environment. But imagine the commercial element there that says, I'm not going to buy a license and have that and running for the next 12 months, etc. I want some level. This is where the adaptive cloud really comes home to play. Is I want it to be able to dynamically allocate my licensing that I'm purchasing, because now I've got full visibility of all of these assets, what's being used, what's not being used, what's the right licensing that should be used on this server. So there's a whole commercial piece around that from a cost management perspective. So those are the three buckets that I put in: technical, operations, and commercial.
Kanthan, I want to bring you in because you've been doing some great work for cubesys and having some discussions with specifically NFPs around Azure Arc, and me and you have done some demos around that most recently, Kanthan. What's been the feedback that you've had from those clients around when we've shown them Azure Arc and the sort of the benefits of it?
Look, probably the easiest one is it's a no-brainer, right? Most organizations that probably ask in our conversations, why would I not be doing this, right? And it's a valid point. Like, it doesn't cost anything. It's $0 to actually go the Azure Arc path. It gives you a whole bunch of extra insight into your organization. And so even if it might not be the right information for you, at least there's extra information there. So aside from the initial onboarding of Arc, there isn't really any downsides of why you wouldn't go down the Arc path. And most of them have actually found a good use case around, hey, you know what, this gives me a better idea of what this looks like. Like, hey, between Azure and AWS, I'm able to see more a standard approach to seeing what my environments look like. So it really comes down to what's the blockers. Is the challenge around resourcing that's stopping you from going down the Arc path, or is it just really prioritizing something like this to be a project, and really just trying to help organizations push that up further up the ladder to get the team to focus on it. And that's really where we're sitting on at the moment. Is not necessarily going, is Arc the right one for my solution? It's like, how important is it that I need to get it done now?
Excellent. So I want to bring forward a couple of use cases, and unfortunately with this one we can't name the specific client for security reasons. But these are ones I know Microsoft, Phil, you mentioned in our discussions that we've had. So can you just talk a little bit about this one and sort of what the problem was, and how did Azure Arc and this some of the Microsoft services help with that problem?
Yeah, so this is both kind of, it covers all three of those categories that I mentioned, the technical, operational, and the commercial. I can't share. This is similar to. I've got a number of use cases that are very similar to this particular one. So what I will actually do is I can't talk about particular names today, but I'll put them together in terms of, think of the world of the aged care environment. Okay, there's something that it has grown significantly over the years and continues to grow as a very specific subvertical in the non-profit space. And if you think of how it's grown, whether it's by acquisition, whether it's by just sort of by natural growth, what we've ended up with is many environments that have got what I would call as a significant level of legacy debt in their environments. Not right, not wrong. It's a case of a statement of how the sector has matured and grown rapidly over time. People have been very difficult. You can't just stop and say, well, if we were greenfield site, what would we do? And build completely new tooling. And so what we find is a lot of our not-for-profit organizations, we are innovating around the edge, but a lot of the core needs some work and attention because there is a significant amount of legacy debt within the core systems that are utilizing to deliver services in this space. So what you ended up there with, this is mainly across organizations that knew and have wanted to make change and have made change and innovated within their Azure platform, but have also got a significant number of their core platforms on premises, predominantly. And that is the predominant one here is the on-premise piece. So the first piece around here was the first and foremost is around delivering services to the communities. Okay, and so in the aged care communities, therefore the back end systems that have just been there and they're running for years and years, they've had less love and attention to them. Let's be fair, because they are like the old diesel engine that's just going to keep on going and they're going to outlive us all. Okay, a lot of these systems will, but what that does mean is then come back to that one, the commercial piece. Are we overpaying? Are we right paying? Licensing changes over time. Are we looking at compliance in this space? Do we really have true visibility of what we have? So there's a compliance angle there. That comes back to the visibility piece that Kanthan talked about earlier. But the other one is where I started the discussion as well, is from security. These may be core systems, but there is a lot of change and attack vectors as we start opening up around the edges of our organizations. And again, a lot of that happened through COVID as well, where we had to have different ways of accessing our systems when we were all sat at home and we weren't allowed to be in our offices. So there's a significant piece on the security play here as well, and to ensure that we know we have these systems. Yes, we have them protected from whether there is some level of network protection, whether there is some kind of client protection on these devices, but there was no mechanism to get an overall landscape of what is my security posture across all of my systems, because they are all completely interlinked, interrelated, and integrated systems now. I can get into somewhere on the edge, imagine, I don't know. I am sure there will be somewhere in the edge in a slightly less secure environment that can then be exploited to traverse networks and get to systems and just imagine the data that is being kept within some of these environments, that PII data that we have to be so particular about and ensure that we really have got the maximum level of security and safety around that information, especially for some of the most vulnerable people in our societies as well. So it's very powerful. It's it really is such a simple solution. So I install a simple agent, and instantly from that point, I can get full operational management and visibility across this. I can look at what is my licensing posture and compliance across all of these different environments, including the legacy ones that I may not have had that much visibility into previously. How can I ensure that I've got the right, all the security and all the log data is all being captured explicitly into the single central location, so I'm ready to use AI-based tools across this as well. A phenomenal set of use cases. Really, the thing that brings these together is though it's that legacy debt, those legacy applications. We've just evolved and we've just grown. We haven't had time to stop and actually spend significant amounts of money retooling.
I think it's very interesting the point you just made at the start there about that. Obviously now what's going to be a historic event in history, COVID, when that COVID hit, a lot of organizations, specifically NFPs as well, with that legacy debt that you mentioned, were like, oh my God, this has happened overnight. They had to put a lot of things in place to facilitate getting online. But now it's almost like organizations and NFPs are going, okay, what happens? God forbid we have another another COVID-19 sort of incident where, we lose everything overnight. We have to pivot overnight. So a lot of them are doing things like going to Azure Arc and looking at sort of services to prevent that's the same struggles that they had then from happening. And this is a prime example of that, I think.
It is, and it's that case of, I would love, and the organisation themselves would love to be able to build themselves the most dynamic and most dynamic cloud environment possible, and move all of their infrastructure in that way, so that they were absolutely ready for whatever the world throws at them again. However, it's just not a reality sometimes. And so this really is the closest path we can get. But also what it also gives us, and I know cubesys have been doing a lot of work in this space as well, is it because of that visibility, it means that visibility can be shared with the organization's partners. You can say, this is our landscape. What other recommendations have you got for us? How could we approach this a little bit more dynamically? Can we move some of this infrastructure into the cloud so that we can make use of a lot of the innovation and services that are now available? So it's that extra piece that says, we're starting here with Arc. There's a very simple, straightforward starting point, but the end game can take us in many different directions.
Yeah. And just a point you raised about cubesys Arc, we're doing quite a bit of work around that. Kanthan, I just want to quickly bring you in and coming towards the end of the session now. Just talk about this limited offer that we do have at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So for everyone who's looking at Arc, we understand that resourcing can be a challenge. It's also, technically, especially if you're working with external partners and you don't want to spend the money to get Arc cubesys and Microsoft have come together to do the deployment for $0 for the first 50 servers. So what we can do is we either actually jump in and do the actual deployment for you, or we can actually hold hands and work with your team to get them on the right direction. But what that means is you're not worried about getting this actual project done. You can actually assign resources or know that somebody from cubesys can actually jump on and assist with this piece. And as part of that, we'll also help you with making sense of some of that data and setting up your dashboarding, so you can start looking at, okay, what are the type of information that's coming in, and how do I build my own dashboards around it. So we'll get you started with a couple of the basic dashboards, and then obviously depending on your use cases, we're happy to help you extend that out if you want to do that as paid engagement. But this will get you started on that process of getting familiar with Arc.
Perfect, thank you, Kanthan. So that's the end of this discussion, today's panel discussion. We have our next event, Unlocking Hidden Value, 5 game-changing adaptive cloud capabilities, and that'll bring to an end sort of our adaptive cloud series. So we've got Chris Hales and myself, who are both senior cloud consultants. We're going to have Dean Cochran from Microsoft back. We'll also have Asa Singh joining us, who's our marketing lead. I'd like to give a massive thank you to Phil and Kanthan for joining me today. Your insights have been really good, really interesting discussion. So thank you to you both for your time.